My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Phoebe Segal. Phoebe serves as the Mary Bryce Comstock Senior Curator of Greek and Roman Art at the Museum of Fine Arts. She's here to inform us about the very informative and timely exhibition she co-curated with Patrick Murphy and others entitled Power of the People, Art and Democracy. Currently on view at the Museum of Fine Arts until February 16th, this extremely thought-provoking installation features 180 works of art, drawn mostly entirely from the Museum of Fine Arts collection, that examine the promise, practice, and preservation of democracy. During the program, we'll hear why and how the exhibition came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate the power and role of art as a medium that critiques, inspires, and shapes democracy. Let's start by meeting Phoebe and then finding out all about the power of the people, art and democracy. Welcome, Phoebe. So delighted to be able to be here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about the exhibition.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to tour the exhibition, learned a lot, and eager to find out more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if you'd briefly share just a little bit more about your background and professional interest, please.
Thank you. So I am a curator of ancient Greek and Roman art. So I come at the topic of democracy a little bit from the ancient world. And in terms of my professional path, I was a Latin student in high school and also had the good fortune of taking art history in high school. And so those interests merged into, ancient art and archaeology. And I love working in a museum because we get to reach a really broad audience. And one of the greatest pleasures of learning about the past is also sharing it with other people. So this project gave me a chance to branch out into other areas and to learn new things, which is always fun. And I should also mention that when my mother became pregnant with me, she was working on the Jimmy Carter campaign. And I recently, actually on the day of his passing, I was going through old family photographs and I found a letter from the head of the campaign in Boston, thanking my mother, typewritten letter, thanking her for her service, and then in a handwritten note, congratulating her on her pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
So that was very poignant, especially having just co-curated this exhibition. And one other note I wanted to say about my upbringing is that I grew up with a poster from that campaign by Peter Max that's ahead of Lady Liberty with the words, "My love is America, vote!" exclamation. And that was in my bedroom when I was a child and throughout my teenage years. And so it just that image and that message of voting through this like visual representation, it really formed me as a thinker and as a citizen and is really part of who I am. So that's sort of the foundations of how I came to this project, to think about how ideas about democracy have been embedded in works of art from antiquity through the present.
Wow. Well, my next question was going to be what inspired you to come up with the exhibition, but it was destined, it sounds like. But coming to present day, how did it all come together? Because an incredible collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is an example of what our museum can do. And just to talk about a little bit about how I came to this project. So in 2021, we opened 5 new galleries of ancient art, the ancient Greek and Roman and Byzantine art. And when we were planning that new suite of galleries a few years before that, so something like 2018, we were talking at the time about, why these specific ancient cultures are relevant to us today. And so we kept coming back to our political system, which is, partially modeled on Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic, perhaps more the Roman Republic than Athens. And we kept sort of hinting at it, but I felt like I wasn't able at that time to really fully explore like the points of connection in visual terms. And so that was something that I was personally interested in doing. And then alongside that, Patrick Murphy, my co-curator, my official co-curator in this exhibition, although there were many curators who touched the project through suggestions that they made. The exhibition draws on 7 different curatorial departments. There were 4 different conservation labs that weighed in on that had to treat objects for the exhibition. Patrick was also thinking from a different angle about an exhibition, I think at the time, about printmaking and activism. And so we had these 2 ideas that were kind of like parallel. And then about a year, actually only about a year ago, did we have the opportunity to scale up to this to this scope and to put forth the 3-part visual argument that we make in the exhibition. So
yeah, could you speak a little bit? How did you come up with this structure of promise, practice, and preservation?
So there were many different ways that one could have gone about organizing an exhibition about something as messy as democracy. And I keep telling people that my 14-year-old son asked me, he said, "Mom, is it organized by time or place?" And I replied, "Neither." And then he asked me tentatively, "Is it organized? Like ... And I said, "Yes, it's organized conceptually." So I always felt that a conceptual framework was stronger because I thought it would connect the dots a lot better than just like a temporal or geographic, frame. But getting that conceptual framework, into something that could be like followed by a visitor to the exhibition was really something that we had to do with our interpretive planner for the exhibition, Jordan Cromwell, who did an amazing, so we had like these sort of, not inchoate, but, somewhat incoherent, ideas. And Jordan helped us like iron them into this like narrative structure. And yet, like any other organizing principle, it cuts off some associations. So there are many more points of contact and many other ways that we could have, done this. But I'd say the 3, and I know we'll go into more depth about the 3 like rooms of the exhibition, but the 3 themes, because there are many themes that run throughout the show, the 3 that I think are the most salient, perhaps, are the way in which art, and this is a general claim that I'm making about works of art, but it particularly applies to ones that engage with the theme, with the issue of democracy, the way that works of art reflect, so mirror a society's values, and also like affirm and reaffirm them, right? So that's one point of connection. And then the other is the gap, the way that works of art show us the gap or gaps between our aspirations and our ideal visions of democracies, and then the realities of democracies and how they sometimes fall short. And then the third one is really about the way that artists are able to advocate for social change through their work across a range of issues, and not just through, we're looking right now at a picture from at a photo from the preservation room, not just through protest posters and conspicuously activist works of art, but also more subtle forms. of activism. So that's kind of the frame. But I'm happy to go into,
Yeah, why don't we move on? Because we're fortunate to have a selection of images from the three rooms, and we'll look at some from first room entitled Promise. If you could share a little commentary about the few works we're going to enjoy.
yeah, thank you. So this is ahead of Socrates, probably the most famous Greek philosopher, whose opinions about democracy are known to us mostly through his student Plato, and because Socrates didn't actually leave behind any writings that we know about. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, and I just want to say that this is actually in the introduction to the exhibition, and it's paired with another work by a large multimedia work that's by the contemporary artist Tamashi Jackson, who is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they're there really as the sort of like the bookends of the exhibition. But we know from Plato's writings that Socrates, who also was put to death, of course, by an Athenian jury, was both a proponent but also dubious about democracy, because his view, or one of his views, was that he had concerns about the people governing when the people don't know anything, right? When they're uneducated. And there's actually of course, it was still preferable to tyranny. And there is a kind of a theme throughout the exhibition of the importance of civic education. We have a portrait of John Adams, who was a big proponent
Mhm.
of civic education, and also a kind of what I'd like to say is a comment on the importance of works of art in our civic education visually, because many of us are visual learners. I've learned this about myself in middle age. And one of the things we're doing with this exhibition is really highlighting the role of the museum as a place of civic learning, and a place of civic engagement. So,
For the sake of time, let's move on.
okay.
In just a few words, a wonderful contrast from the past and the present with this piece.
Yeah, I love this piece by Barbara Kruger, who is a feminist artist. And this piece, so Barbara Kruger has throughout her career participated in artists collectives raising awareness for social issues. And in this particular example, this is a bandana which she made as part of a group called Artists Band Together during the pandemic. And she's obviously adopted the motif of the American flag. And she has written in all these questions that have to do with power dynamics, which is a big theme that runs throughout her work. But what I love is or I'm especially drawn to, is what she writes against the black background, against the blue background, sorry, where she writes, "Look for the moment when pride becomes contempt." And it reminds, I think she really puts her finger on that controversy or that tension during the pandemic between like wearing a face covering as an act of good citizenship, and then the
Mhm.
repudiation or the challenging of that by people who claimed that no, it's actually like democracy is about liberty, right, and freedom not to wear a face covering. So it's really
Yeah.
I see this as like a politicization of this moment, and that both of those things are actually true in our democracy.
Mhm.
That's super interesting.
You know, this next piece is also in the area of Judith around 1520, but for the sake of time, we're going to move to the next room
Yeah,
entitled Practice and hear a few words about this
yeah.
very well-known poster.
Right. So in the previous room, in the promise, we're looking at like narratives around democracies. So the Judith, just to say one word about her, she's there as a tyrant slayer in the Florentine Republic. And there are other examples of tyrant slayers in the exhibition. And so what we're focusing on there is sort of the mythologies of the foundings of republics and democracies. But if we move on to the practice, we focus there really on the vote as the central instrument of democracy. So, and we're looking here at a reminder of the obligation to vote. So this is Shepard Fairey from the 2008 election. Most people are more familiar with the poster that he did of Obama. We chose not to feature living politicians or any like politically partisan imagery. But so we were talking in this section about the obligation to vote, access to the vote, right? Because we have other material there pertaining to the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and then also the integrity of the vote, which we know is so important. Then I think your next one is the sower, the Millet sower. Many people have asked me, why did you include this in this exhibition? And it's really because the sower was, and this is thanks to the expertise of my colleagues, in particular, Katie Hansen, our curator of paintings, of European paintings, that the sower was painted in 1850. Now, prior to that, there had been universal male suffrage in France. But in 1850, there was a conservative law passed that required a voter to, of course, all male at that time, to produce tax records proving that they had inhabited the same domicile for 3 consecutive years, which meant that people like the sower, migrant laborers and agricultural workers who moved all over, were effectively disenfranchised. So this is included as evidence of voter suppression, not just in our country, but in other places as well.
And again, while we could go on in depth about the images, unfortunately, for sake of time, just a few words about this very powerful piece.
Yeah, this is a really powerful piece. And I have to say that the artist, Jean Quick-to-See Smith, passed away 2 days ago. And she was a real visionary, an amazing teacher, an activist in her community. And what she's done here is she's given us a map of the US and integrated the federally recognized tribes that she could fit into the various states. But the most important, I think, you know, for us looking together, the most important thing really is the technique where she has a background layer of paint and then she's painted over it in this sort of drip style. And what that really is speaking to is the washing away, right, and the erasure of indigenous culture and history and peoples, frankly, from this land.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. One that I really stood out for me in the entire exhibition, I have to say. Bringing more current, quick word about this council meeting.
Yeah, so this is a photograph by Paul Shambroom, who had a project where he went around documenting small town council meetings. The other major subject of the practice room is about public service. So from a very local community, you know, small community scale up to, and because we tend to think of the grand, you know, the presidential or the federal, but how the importance of local and government. And then we also talk here about jury service and the justice system, and also military service and non-combat support of war efforts. And I think we'll skip by a photograph of an empty jury box, which in many ways is a kind of Rorschach test when you look at it. I've looked at it with many people for the viewer's experience or expectations of the justice system. And this is something that these 2 images actually are 2 of the ones that I spent a lot of time discussing with the teens, the MFA teens who participated in the curating of this exhibition. So for a year, I met with them every Wednesday, and we looked at lots of art with other curators, and so it was really part of the object list for this exhibition. The core object list was driven by their reactions, positive and negative. And I don't mean negative, like I don't like it, but like this doesn't fit the frame, you know?
Yeah.
So we looked at a lot of things that didn't make it into the show. So they were really partner curators in the exhibition.
And entering the third room, we see this very well-known piece by Paul Revere, speaking about preservation.
Yeah. So the preservation room is really about is about what you do when your democracy isn't working right. And let's say you voted. I'm just sort of yeah, you voted and maybe it went your way, maybe it didn't. What are the other ways that you can advocate for change? And so really here we're focusing on voice, and in particular on our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, and as a corollary, you know, freedom of expression and artistic expression, and then also the right to assembly and the right to protest. So those are kind of the two major subjects that drive this presentation. And so this beautiful, exquisite, one of a kind artifact of the American Revolution, which the MFA was privileged to purchase in 1949 with, by the way, contributions from local school children, right? This was actually like a crowdsourced, crowd-funded acquisition, is itself a protest object because it commemorates the Glorious 92's refusal to rescind the letter that they had sent, you know, convincing or suggesting that members of the colony not pay the requisite taxes. So it really is, and it actually, it names on the other side, it praises John Wilkes, who we have a small porcelain statuette of John Wilkes, the English radical journalist, who's sort of like the modern founder of a free press, is in the exhibition just a few feet from this bull, and the bull actually names him because he was so influential on the founders and the conception of free speech in this country. So, yeah.
You know, and moving ahead almost more than 200 years in the Boston area,
Yeah,
we come to see this
yeah.
very well-known photo, the soiling of Old Glory.
Right. So there are many moments in the preservation room that speak to, and actually also throughout the exhibition, that speak to Boston's history as, I mean, we know, you know, it was one of the homes of the American Revolution and also a center for the abolitionist movement. So we have an abolitionist, Julia Ward Howe, represented in a memorial relief in the practice room. We also have in the preservation material from the Vietnam War. So protest posters that were made at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in 1970 in response to the murder of the 4 students by the National Guard at Kent State University. And here we have, and those were used in protests all around town. And here we see the scene of a protest around the time of the integration of the school system. And this photo is displayed alongside photographs mostly from the civil rights movement or era. This is later because Boston actually didn't fully integrate until the 1970s. This is something that everybody kind of knows but doesn't really talk about. I mean, starting to be talked about more. I'm from New York, so I've only been here for my adult life, 16 years. But this photograph, what's interesting about it, and actually the photographer Stanley Foreman is still living, is that my understanding is that the protester who's wielding the American flag as a weapon, and this is not the only example in the exhibition of such an image, because there's one in the woodcut in the Promise Room that depicts the January 6th riot, is that this fellow who's leveling this flag at Ted Landsmark, who is a well-known Boston attorney and was very involved in the museum for many years, is that the young man actually was upset because half of his friends were going to have to switch schools. And so it's a very complex photograph because we make a lot of assumptions, and oftentimes people's motivations are deeper and more complex than we might attribute them. So it is,
Yes.
it's very interesting, but it does remind us of of Boston's history, both progressive history and also reactive or reactionary. Yeah.
Yeah. Well put, well put. And the last one to hear a few words about, also very timely.
Yeah, thank you. And I should mention that Patrick a few days ago said, "Oh, we should have put this next to the sewer."
Yeah.
And that's just another example of how many different ways we could have gone about this because the material is so rich and there's so many points of connection. But this is a lino cut by an artist named Carlos Barberena. He made it during the pandemic when we kept talking about essential workers, many of whom were
Mhm.
agricultural workers, so, many of whom, I can't say many, but some of whom are undocumented.
Mhm.
Of course, this is a very relevant topic right now. And he created this print, but it's in the shape of a shopping bag, right? To remind us of like the commercialism of our country. And also he's put the central figure in, and there's another one in the exhibition that doesn't have the shopping bag handle, but he has drawn on imagery from paper money, right? So that like the presidents
Mhm.
are surrounded by these, like vegetal motifs and inscriptions and so forth. So he's both commenting on like the lack of appreciation
Yeah.
for these workers, but also he's monumentalizing them through this form. So it's, comment on greed, but also a way of raising awareness. So
Wonderful. In closing, what's been some of the reaction and feedback you've either observed or heard um, from the range of visitors and others who have enjoyed the exhibition?
well, it's mostly been positive. I would say that people have and one of the things we're working on actually is a visitor survey and capturing more feedback. I've taken many groups in the exhibition, students in a range of disciplines. I'm actually speaking at BU Law School next week. I never would have imagined that I would, speak at a law school. This is like not usual for an art historian, but it's also
Mhm.
a way, evidence of how many different disciplines can come together over a topic like
Right.
this.
Sure.
But also, a lot of people have said that the show was very well timed, and very brave because we did take a risk by putting this out. But mostly I've heard that it's poignant and timely and rich and there's a lot of information and a lot of text and I'm very pleased by that because really what I wanted to encourage was for people um, to think and and mainly what I have been thinking is like, how can we do better? Basically, like how do these images inspire us to do better? And so if it does that for just a handful of people, that's great.
Oh
And
no,
the more the merrier.
I think you and Patrick and your other collaborators definitely accomplished that. It left me with a lot of questions, especially in the times now and going forward. So thank you for all the effort into this exhibition and well done.
Thank you so much, Jay. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And it just gives me great pleasure. And I hope that anyone watching will come and see it. It closes February 16th. And we'd love to have you.
Look forward to your upcoming exhibitions. Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.